Hello, my name is Nikki, and today we are going to talk about Darren Deon Vann. Darren Deon Vann was born March 21st, 1971, in Indiana. Little is known of his early life. We do know that in the early 90s, he moved to Cherry Hill, North Carolina. It's here that it was believed that he had his first brush-in with the law, although it is unknown what for or if he spent time behind bars. He then moved to Texas, where he joined and was then dishonorably discharged from the Marine Corps. It was also here that he met and married Maria Vann, who was 30 years his senior. Maria's son, Edward Matlock, wasn't pleased with the marriage, as he found Vann to be a strange man. He also discovered that Darren spent a lot of time in seedier parts of Boston. Things got worse for Darren when he found himself laid off from the temp agency he worked for and was unable to find a new job. He decided that it was best to move, and he and Maria ended up in Gary, Indiana. It was in Gary that Darren had his first major police incident. In 2004, Darren was in an altercation with his girlfriend, or should I say his mistress, as he was still married to Maria, and the man that she was seeking shelter from Darren with. Darren found out where he was staying, and upon arrival, Darren threatened to burn the man's house down. When the police showed up, Darren came out with a young woman who he had gripped by the neck with one hand and a gas can in the other. He threatened to set them both on fire. The police were eventually able to get close enough to Darren and apprehend him. For this, Vann would be charged with a felony, but for unexplained reasons, he only spent 90 days in jail and was released on probation. After his release, Darren and his wife moved back to Austin, Texas. Here, Darren began to escalate his criminal behavior. He met up with an escort in her apartment, where he essayed her, beat her, and attempted to choke her. This crime caught up with him in 2008. That July, Darren was indicted of the crime and sentenced to 5 years in prison. In 2009, while incarcerated, his wife would file for divorce, and it would be granted in 2011. On July 5, 2013, Vann was released and registered as a low-risk sex offender. He then decided he had had enough of Austin and moved back to Gary, Indiana. While Darren was in prison, a reporter by the name of Thomas Hargrove was analyzing the crime rate data in the area. He used an algorithm which strongly suggested that there was a serial killer in the Gary, Indiana area. Hargrove repeatedly tried to get the police to look into 15 suspicious deaths that occurred between 1980 and 2008, and the local deputy coroner agreed with him. She even added 3 other suspicious deaths to the list. Unfortunately, all suspicions were rebuffed by the Lake County Police, who take care of Gary, Indiana. This could have stopped the horrors that would come later. Thomas Hargrove would go on to use his algorithm to track America's unsolved murders and found the Murder Accountability Project. We are now going to fast forward to October 17th, 2014. This was when the police were called to a Motel 6. Africa Hardy was a sex worker who at the time was working alongside a partner for safety. When Africa stopped responding to texts and calls, her partner went into the room. There they discovered Africa's unclothed body in the bathtub. The police were called, and they noted that she had been strangled both manually and with a cord. The police then checked the motel's cameras and identified Darren's vehicle leaving the motel parking lot. The next day, October 18th, Darren Deon Vann was apprehended. In his possession was, among several other key pieces of evidence, Africa's pink cell phone. Police used the phone records from her phone to track her last activities to Darren. During questioning, Vann would not only confess to the murder of Africa, but 6 other women. He went on to lead the police to the locations of all 6 remains. All were found in abandoned houses within 5 miles of each other. Tiara Beatty, 26, was last seen on the 13th of January, 2014. She left her home, where she lived with her 2-year-old son and fiancé, Marvin Clinton. Darren later stated that when he saw her, he was just mad. apparently it had nothing to do with her. He essayed her and then strangled Tiara before leaving her body in a room in an abandoned house, which he barricaded with a dresser. During the time she was missing, her fiancé, who was frustrated with the lack of police effort to find her, searched over 30 houses before the police stopped him, as the houses were deemed unsafe. Tanya Gatlin was a 27-year-old addict who was reported missing in January of 2014. Only her skeletal remains would be found. Christine Williams was a 36-year-old mother of 4 who was prone to disappear. She had substance abuse issues, and she was thought to have sold substance to Darren, also to have bought from him. Her mother-in-law hadn't seen her since February 2014. Vann had believed that she had left the city to avoid paying him $40, but in actuality, she had spent a couple of nights in jail. Once she was out, Darren hunted her down, strangled her, and left her body in the basement of an abandoned building. She had to be identified by dental records. Tracy Martin was a 43-year-old. She also had issues with substance abuse and had resorted to sex work. Vann found her online and on July 4th met up with Tracy. He strangled her with her own necklace and left her in an abandoned house. There was very little effort to find her when she went missing. When Vann led them to the body, the police actually had searched the property 48 hours earlier and had failed to find her mummified body in a closet. Anith Jones was 35. Unlike the others, her murder was premeditated. Darren was offered $200 in drugs and $300 in cash by a friend because she was going to play a large role in an upcoming legal matter. Darren offered to pay Anith for intercourse, which she accepted. Afterwards, he strangled her with a thin rope and moved her body into the woods. He then eventually moved her body into an abandoned house and covered her body with teddy bears and old tires. Sonia Billingsley was 53 years old and the mother of 5. She was known to lose contact with her family from time to time. She was reported missing on February 7, 2014. Her remains would be found in the same house as Tanya Gatlin. They would be the last 2 victims to be identified, as it had to be done using DNA samples. All 6 victims were found on October 19, 2014. Darren's first hearing was set for October 22, 2014, when the judge tried to swear him in, he refused to speak. He was held in contempt. The next court date was set for the 28th, the same month, where he pled not guilty to the deaths of Africa Hardy and Anith Jones. The first trial was then set for June 22, 2015, after the death penalty request was submitted. Once his attorney found out about the new request, they asked for a delay, which was approved. In March of 2016, charges for the 5 other deaths were laid. After several other delays because of new charges and a judge change, the final date was set for October 22, 2018. Finally, on May 4, 2018, Darren took a plea deal that took the death penalty off the table and pled guilty to all 7 murders. On May 25th, he was sentenced to 7 life sentences to be served concurrently and denied possibility of parole. Darren Vann ended up stating that these 7 victims weren't all of them, though. During his 14 hours of recorded confessions, Darren stated that he had murdered dozens of other women across the country. He stated that whenever he felt himself slipping, he would get on a bus or a train to get as far away from his family as possible. He claimed to have unalived women in several states, including North Carolina, Minnesota, Milwaukee, and California, but that most were in Chicago, Illinois. Since the victims were mostly random, there was no evidence suggesting a serial killer, and the police are now having a difficult time linking Vann to the unsolved murders, but they are continuing to work on the cold cases.